Hello, this is Janine K. Brown, and welcome back to the Untoxic Boss. Today's topic is really important to me. Our show today is true or false. Women don't belong in corporate leadership. I hope you get this answer right because I believe the answer is false. Women do belong in corporate leadership, but we're going to talk about why women are exiting the workplace. So in this episode, we're going to confront the critical challenges blocking women's progress in corporate leadership, focusing on the pervasive issues of workplace toxicity and misogyny. We begin by recognizing problems. We're going to tell you what those problems are, and those problems are true. We're going to highlight how they manifest through both overt discrimination and subtle biases. I believe it's our collective responsibility to advocate for a more inclusive and respectful corporate culture and to remove the toxic ideologies of what a leader is and who they can be. This episode is a rally cry for change, urging you to speak up and to destroy the barriers of toxicity, misogyny, patriarchy, and really actively create equitable leadership opportunities for women. So let's dive into today's episode. This topic is really important and really relevant to me now, probably more than ever, because we've made significant progress, right? We've seen this progress, but there is still something, like we're still faced and confronting the critical challenges blocking women's progress in corporate leadership. Focusing on pervasive issues of workplace toxicity and misogyny, we begin to recognize these patterns and these problems, highlighting how they manifest through overt discrimination and subtle biases in the workplace. And if you're a woman, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So this conversation is about the experience women have in the workplace, but I want to say this conversation is really for men, and men who are allies, and maybe men who believe it's true that women don't belong in corporate leadership. But I want us to take it's a collective responsibility to advocate for more inclusive and respectful corporate cultures and to remove toxic ideologies of what a leader is and who they can be. In this conversation, I'm calling it a rally cry for change. I want to urge all of us to speak up and destroy the barriers of toxicity and misogyny, and to really actively create equitable leadership opportunities for women. And so what's going on that makes me want to talk about this topic? Well, one of the things that's happening is that there are far too many women, in my opinion, exiting the workplace because of their experiences with teams that they lead, men in their organization, and I would even say some of the gatekeepers of this bad toxicity around misogyny and and patriarchy, gatekeepers like women who also, have these sort of same kind of ideologies around women be in leadership, can they work for a woman boss, the things that we say that I think are really destroying women at work. And it's really real to me because I have a client and they've lost several members in the high leadership ranks in their organization who are partners in their firm, and other women that I've talked to and that we coach and that have been in programs that we have put together in companies who've left the organization. And when we talk to them or they reach out to me privately, some of them is like, I just can't take it anymore. The way people talk to me, the how they communicate with me, I just don't want to deal with that anymore. And so let's talk a little bit about the history around this particular topic. So in the early beginnings, let's go all the way back to the late 19th century and the early 20th centuries, right? In the Industrial Revolution and during the time of World War I, it, catapulted more women entering into the workforce, primarily in roles as nurses and teachers, and maybe even some light factory work. So women were leaving their homes and working through the day. Some of them were, enlisting and serving and supporting our military troops. So this was kind of like the beginning of, more women coming into the workplace. And those opportunities, although they were limited, they kind of marked the beginning of this shift in societal perceptions toward women's roles outside of their domestic home-based spheres of influence. And then we started we about to break the glass ceiling here, right? Despite all of these advances, that women have faced and they continue to face, they started running into this glass ceiling and this invisible barrier to the highest levels of leadership and management because, like, women can't be bosses. I think is pretty much the question that people were asking. And so throughout the 1980s and the 1990s, women began to make inroads in executive roles through disparities in representation. And we started seeing more of them. But in our most recent years, like here in the 21st century, we've been, like bossing up and making boss moves. And entering the 21st century, we have witnessed remarkable progress, right? We've had our first female Fortune 500 CEO in 1999. We've increased representation of women of color in CEO roles. Women are leading in politics, running the House, and they're doing all of these great roles, and they're partners in public accounting firms and law firms. They're deans at colleges. They're university presidents. So this growing visibility that they have, even in non-traditional fields like STEM, right? Science and technology, engineering and mathematics, we see women rising to the ranks, right? They are demonstrated they have the intellectual capacity to do these roles. Yet these challenges remain. Like I said, I'm seeing women exit. The data is showing that most women don't want to own a business. They just want to continue to live. And they want to thrive. And they find that I can't do that here in this organization. I keep running into roadblocks. So my question is, why is this happening? What is the backlash to women leading and being in leadership roles in the workplace? Why are these microaggressions that lead to extreme burnout for women? Why are they starting to persist? And I would even say accelerate. Women are experiencing microaggressions at work, and they're 3 times more likely to consider quitting and 4 times more likely to feel almost and always burned out compared to their male counterparts in the same roles. The microaggressions include being mistaken for junior employee, receiving comments on their emotional state, disproportionately affecting women of color, LGBTQ women. I know most recently, last year, I was sitting on this board, and I've been on this board at this point. I was in my 5th year and really excited. And I had 1 year left and had done a lot of work in this role as a board member. And at this point, I had been voted to be the vice chair of the board with expectations that maybe I could move into the chair position. And I've chaired boards before, much larger than this one, a larger budget. I've raised, nonprofit dollars. I started raising money in the nonprofit space in my late 20s. So I raised millions of dollars for nonprofit organizations. And just, I came with the receipts and the goods to do this work. But the entire time I was on this board, I was constantly faced with just opposition around everything. If I asked a question, if I stated a factual knowledge from the men who served as chairs on this board. I even had to have a call. Like, we had a call, try to mediate a relationship. And I'm like, this is foolishness, because I knew I was adding value, and my comments and the way I lead and the way I communicate was not about being personal and not attacking anyone. Because like I said, I've served on boards much larger, much more diverse, much more, a more heavier lift, but kept running into this. One day when we talk about like these comments about our emotional state, I remember I responded to an email and I got a text from the chair that I was vice chair to. And his text said, "You must be on one today." And I thought to myself, a whole lot of things. And first it was like, calm down, Janine. And then the second thing was, what does that mean, really? Why would someone send me an email about that because of what I wrote? Send me a private text, right? He didn't respond to the whole email group. And what does that mean? What sort of gender narrative is he trying to say about me that, one, is completely inappropriate, right? To ask me if I'm on one. And I asked a couple of people what that meant. And no, I was not on one, based on what that means. But these are the kind of things that women face over and over and over again. If I am passionate about something, or I have a strong conviction about an idea that I have, or a decision that we're making, or a conversation, that I have to be overly emotional about it, where men are celebrated for their passion and their commitment and drive and their ability to move things forward. Well, I want to sound the alarm and remind all of you, men are not innately better leaders. They just get more opportunities to fail. That's the bottom line. They're not. They're not born with other leadership skills or anything, but we work, right? The way the workforce is set up, it is not necessarily designed for women to thrive, because the workforce is set up on a patriarchal system, which has a significant amount of hierarchy in it, competition, a lot of bravado that's in it. And women don't typically come as problem solvers in a hierarchical form, right? We don't normally lean into our title or being the fastest as an athlete or being the strongest as an athlete into the workforce, right? The matriarchy, while it is not less than, it is only different. And as women, what we bring to the workplace is more of I would say a line or a circle to leadership, right? It's not the hierarchy, it's more of a circle. Like, we're all here, we're going to gather together, we're going to collaborate, we're going to throw out ideas, and we're going to, work through these different viewpoints and not take it personal. But the unfortunate part is that women, in order to be seen as strong leaders and to be successful, we have to fall into this hierarchy of competition and, bravado in order to be seen as leaders. Otherwise, we're weak. Otherwise, we're not demonstrating executive presence. And I think those are the things that happen. And because the patriarchy is based in a lot of this hierarchical power, that when a strong and thoughtful and well communicative woman shows up, who stands her ground about the direction and how she's going to lead a team, she gets a lot of pushback and resistance. And I think some of it is not necessarily intended to be combative from men, but I just think it just shows up that way. I don't think a lot of men are even aware of how they show up, right? The over talking, the belittling, the cutting people off. Like, they show a significant amount of emotion, right? Passionate emotion. But no one calls them out on it. Like, calm down, Brad. We don't do that to men, but we do that to women. And so what we're seeing is that the labor force participation rate for women back in 2020 was 56.2%. It has decreased, right? It has decreased 1.2% points since 2019. And so we're decreasing. This decline reflects pandemic impacts on the labor market. Unemployment rates for women have doubled from the previous years. Hispanic and Black women are experiencing higher joblessness rates. And then we have a huge number of women that are saying, you know what, I'm just going to start a business. I'll even take a pay cut. I'm going to exit the traditional workplace, do my same work and skill, and do it as a consultant. And the interesting thing about that is that they get far more respect. And so, when we think about this, again, this question and this topic about, is it true or false? Is the corporate leadership the right place for women? I want to say yes. And the reason it is because women have been proven over and over again to be far better at leading teams, far better at managing corporate culture and morale, just because of our collaborative natures, our abilities to get consensus among the ranks. We are far more emotionally intelligent from a lot of standpoints, right? And in the way that we can identify that something's wrong, right? We identify it quicker and we're willing to slow down. And it's just an innate thing. I think some of it does come from a nurturing, and like this nurturing standpoint that we have and our ability to nurture. But we notice those things. Like, we are well aware, like we can look and say, oh, you know what? Yolanda is not herself today. And we will stop and ask, right? We will not point blame that she's made an error. we will first ask, hey, what's going on with you? You don't seem to be yourself. And so those are the kind of things that really help impact how teams operate in their organization. Now, you might be saying, you could be a man listening, who's like, oh, she's beating up on men. And I am not. If you know me, I am a champion of all people, and I'm definitely a champion of men in the workplace. And I work very closely with a lot of men who get it, who are allies to women in this space. They understand the issues. They actually manage and monitor their own behavior because they are involved in conversations like this. But they know that the glass ceiling exists. They know that there's limited visibility for women. They acknowledge the stereotyping and the bias and the prejudice around women. They know that there's lack of sponsorship. There's probably over mentorship of women at work. And they also understand that women are pulled into trying to manage both work and life in higher degrees that they are asked to do, right? There's a lot of benevolence for men that work in the positive, that work in the negative for women. And an example of that is when a man announces that his wife is pregnant, significant amount of celebration and often conversations about income. How much more money do they need to make? Men are, and I've seen that go down in several organizations. When women announce a pregnancy, and they don't have to announce it, right? We see it. When that happens for women, what happens, the conversations that happen is, oh, I wonder if she's going to leave the workforce. Is she going to quit her job? How long is she going to take maternity leave? Is she going to come back? We start using things like, oh, she has baby brain, to say she's not as smart as she was before she got pregnant or had a kid. Right? All of these things are very different for men and women. And those things impact how women show up at work. And those things are so important. And when I talk about, the lack of mentorship is always comes up, right? Whenever I'm in these conversations with my clients and we're talking, trying to solve the issues of how women move up in leadership, I always have to push back. I don't think women need more mentoring programs. I don't think women of color need more mentoring or developmental programs. I think they need safe places to fail. They need safe places to be able to take on responsibilities of leading organizations and moving them forward with the same amount of support and enthusiasm as a man who has the same amount of experience, right? So we will give men the benefit of the doubt. We are hopeful in their potential. And for women, we are measured. Oh, maybe she can't do it, or maybe she needs a co-lead, right? I think we need to stop that, right? We build that in to the leadership roles for men and women, and it's so different. We don't put men in programs in organizations, the male leadership development incubator program. We don't do that. There's an assumption that they know how to lead. They know how to be innovative and creative. They can drive revenue. But women, in order for them to get promoted, they have to go through some women's leadership mastery program. And I'll say, I've designed those programs. I love those programs. But I think if we're going to do it, we need to do it for everybody. I'm at that place now, right? And not to reduce the consulting work that we do. I just think we created programs and these systems that perpetuate the bias of women needing to be in a developmental program in order for them to lead. And I'm just going to call foul on that one. I don't think that is necessary. I think what we need to do in organizations to remove this toxic leadership so that women can stay and desire to stay and work in environments where they feel psychologically safe is that we make sure that we are equitably and equally developing men and women at the same rate. And we are giving them the opportunities to lead and to work on high visible projects, right? This idea that there's limited visibility for women, it has to stop. And it starts with men. And I think there are programs out there. There's an organization called He for She, and they do a great job of creating programs and trying to help organizations drive this sort of change. But I will say it still is always some sort of developmental program. And I see that now even in the corporate board leadership space. Organizations are talking about more women serving on corporate boards. And now you see this increase, and also men and women of color. And now you see this increase of corporate board development programs. It's another money grab, right? Everybody's creating these corporate board leadership programs that they did not have in place for white men to serve on those boards. White men didn't have any more corporate board leadership experience before they got to their first corporate board than anyone else. They didn't. They probably even had less volunteer nonprofit board experience than some women who come to boards. For example, me. I've been serving on volunteer boards in leadership roles since I was 27 years old. So for over 20 years, I have served in every single capacity of a board, as a chair, as a treasurer, as a board member. I've done everything except be board secretary just because I refuse. And I'd really suck at it. I know what I'm good at. And I know what I'm bad at too. And these are the kind of things that are continuously happening to women, and we perpetuate that. And I think this is our opportunity to say no more. We need to recognize that women are leaving the organization, and we have to be able to combat toxicity and misogyny in the workplace. And how do we do that? We do that by recognizing that this is a problem. If you are seeing an exodus of women at any level in your organization, you have a problem of leaking talent because of toxicity and misogyny, someone needs to address it, and it needs to be addressed at the top. And it doesn't need to be addressed by just bringing women together. It needs to be addressed talking directly to men about, especially if you find out the women are leaving and you're having exit interviews and you find out that they are leaving because they can no longer take the way people are talking to them at work because of the belittling comments, because of the biased nature of promotions. You need to address that issue head on and put policies in place, and even to an accountability. And I mean accountability both for if they're doing it right and when they do it wrong. What are the consequences of these bad actors in organizations that are pushing women out the front door? We need education and training. We need to have comprehensive education and gender bias and sensitivity training for all employees, focusing on creating and understanding what gender biases are, how they show up, how the organization needs to value the diversity in women and how they lead differently, and the importance of respectful interactions. And also what is inappropriate, right? You do not send a woman a text message saying she must be on one, or if she has an opposing view, telling people that, oh, she must be in a bad mood today, right? I've even had that happen to me. And I'm like, I ain't never really in a bad mood. So where does that come from, right? We don't need men speaking for the emotional well-being of women. We don't need that. We need strong policy implementation. Right, discussing the creation and the enforcement of clear policies that define unacceptable behavior and provide safe mechanisms for reporting incidents without the fear of retaliation, right? So these are psychologically safe policies, and they're not even whistleblower policies. It's like, hey, I see this bias and I've tried to say something about it. I need someone else to speak up for me. And I don't think the other person needs to be retaliated against or isolated or even terminated until they have been told, right? Until they violate the policy and they have been made aware of it. We need leadership accountability, right? We need to stress the roles of leaders in setting the tone for corporate cultures, especially around gender bias and even the intersectionality of women in the workplace, right? This includes leading by example, actively listening to the concerns, the refuse and the restraint to not to reframe or gaslight people and make them feel as if what they are experiencing is overreaction. We need to take decisive action against toxic behaviors. And then finally, I think creating these supportive networks. I do believe employee resource or business resource groups can be really essential in helping to uphold all of these things, like how to recognize the problems and the education and creating policy around this. And I think they need to put that on their agendas, right? Business resource groups need to be really clear. We do programs, but we also help drive change within our organizations. So our women's resource groups and even some of the male ally groups need to be discussing this sort of issue about women leaving the workforce because they are running into a brick wall of misogyny and patriarchy. And then my last and most important comment is to the women. hey sis, hey sister, either one, right? We need to unlock the gate, throw away the key, and tear down the walls. Because unfortunately, many of us, and too many of us, because if it's one, it's too many, in my opinion, too many of us are the gatekeepers of this bias, this behavior around misogyny and this patriarchal viewpoints about women and working for women and working with women. And we need to stop that. We need to be the ones like actively saying, hey, pointing out the women in our organizations that are dynamic leaders who have the potential to lead, right? Both the ones that are doing it in a great way, we need to uphold them, and we need to be saying, hey, this person should be the next executive director. This woman should be the next person in line for partner. We need to be really clear. We need to call that out and be cheerleaders openly in our meetings and one-on-one conversations about the positive experiences that we have, that we see, that we witness, and in ourselves, and be stronger about how we individually have helped a team reach its goal. And we need to be able to do that in an active and confident way. And so I want to end the show with that. That is really what we want to make sure that we're doing, that we are clear about that, because I do think it is false that women don't belong in corporate leadership. Women truly belong in corporate leadership. So thank you for joining today. This topic is really important to me because I have gotten way too many calls over the last 6 months about women leaving the workforce because the culture is toxic. Your organization has changed way too much and does not support healthy well-being in a corporate culture, and that women are just burned out, feel sick and ill because of what they have to deal with when interacting with the men in their workplace. And then I just want to finally say thank you to the men who show up and call out this bias, who stand as allies to support women when they see these toxic behaviors take place in the workplace. So to those brothers, to those men who are, willing to speak up, willing to advocate on behalf of, who are sponsors of women to help them get promoted. I know that was essential in my corporate career, and it has been essential as I have been a CEO and a firm owner of Everyday Lead. And so without men, I could not be where I am today, but also without women speaking up and supporting me, I also would not be here. So thank you again for joining the Untoxic Boss. It is my joy and pleasure to be the host of this topic with you, and I will see you next week. We want to introduce you a resource that we know that will impact your life and your career. It's a book, Unstuck and Unstoppable. It is the ultimate guide to overcoming obstacles and achieving your goals. With practical tips and inspiring stories, the book will help you leverage your value, increase your visibility, and gain recognition to accelerate your career. Take action towards getting the career that you deserve. This book was named Best Career Book of 2022. Get your copy anywhere you buy books, either on Amazon or at our website at unstuckandunstoppablebook.com. Thank you for joining the Untoxic Boss Podcast today. We are here and on a mission to help people stop being a jerk at work. We'll see you here again next week.